told me that he was going to come back, kill me and my parents, I knew where he lived.
Okay.
He lived literally right up that hill, not even half a block away from me.
Brandon, thanks for coming back on again. You came back pretty quickly. One of the things that we touched on before we even got off the air last time was your experience with, you said there were still a lot of things we didn't even cover. And the thing is, like, I don't think everybody's like session ends like that, where we're like, oh man, there's still, I got to hit this. I got to hit that
cliffhanger. Yeah,
exactly. And so then one of the things you mentioned to me just before we got off yesterday or last time was the issues you were talking about with, you had like a heart issue. What happened with that?
Okay. So it's about 2003. I was in second grade. I went to St. Damien, right in town.
Yep.
I was at recess, and pretty much when we came back in for recess, we did like a little Bible study thing or something like that, since it was Catholic school. And I remember sitting down, and it literally felt like someone was punching me from the inside of my chest. It was going boom, 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 boom. And I went up to my teacher, and I told her, like, hey, could you feel my chest? And she put her hand on my chest, and like I remember just seeing her eyes widen. She's like, hey, you got to go to the nurse right now. So I went down to the nurse's office. The nurse had called an ambulance, and it was getting kind of close to the end of the school day. So by the time the ambulance came, they put me on a stretcher to get into the ambulance, and they were wheeling me out the main entrance of the school. And all I remember is like all the parents that were waiting to pick their kids up, they all ran to the front thinking it was like their kid or something. And I remember when they were wheeling me out, there was just a ton of parents just like crowding me. And I'm like, man, this is, and I remember at the time I was like freaking out because I'm like.
But what were you feeling physically? Like, were you because I'm sure emotionally, like you're seeing all these people panic, and when you're younger, like seeing adults panic, I remember was one of the things that would scare me is that if they're afraid, I should be afraid too. So like, what do you feel? Are you feeling yourself like go? Like, are you feeling your vision starting to go? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I was nauseous, dizzy. And then I felt like, you know, when your foot falls asleep or something, you feel that fuzzy kind of
little tingling.
Yeah. Just imagine your whole body feeling like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so they rushed me to South Suburban Hospital in Hazel Crest, which is just a little bit of drive. But I remember they were just pumping me with a bunch of stuff, and they got my heart rate down. But then I had to, like a few days after that, I had to go into surgery for it. And I believe it was called like an ablation or something. But it was a newer form of surgery to where if I had this same problem a year prior, I would have had to have had open heart.
And what was it? Why did the year make a difference?
It was new like technology or something they found.
Oh,
and it was a crazy way because basically my problem was that my parents didn't even know about, or even my like pediatric doctor didn't even see, was I was basically born with, like, they called it circuits. It's kind of like extra veins that lead to your heart, and it would just pump more blood at random times. And I guess whatever I was doing at that recess that day must have triggered it, and we didn't even know I had that problem up until then.
And so then what's the thought process, since you this is the first time you're figuring this stuff out? Like, what exactly did they use on you, and how long did that take?
So it was, I had to go, I remember they couldn't do the surgery at South Sub. I had to go to some hospital way up north. They made it real comfortable for me. I was supposed to be put under, which I was, but I was supposed to have family be there when I was like coming back to it and, you know, not being put out. They were supposed to be there when my surgery was done. And I remember waking up from the amnesia or whatever the stuff they used, and they weren't there. It was just my parents and like my uncles and stuff that were supposed to be there. So I felt kind of like horrible, you know, like it was kind of sad, but like it was, what they had to do though was, basically it was like a little wire with a camera and a laser, and they put one in my neck, one in my inner thigh, and then one, I think it was like somewhere by my elbow, and they just ran it through my body, and they were just zapping the stuff. Like,
the veins.
Yeah.
So essentially the goal is to get rid of the veins entirely. Yep. What exactly, can you explain what exactly the veins are doing? Like what is it that they're doing that's causing that?
Just pumping more blood, I believe. What I had was called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome.
Okay.
I think like only like, I think 1 in 400,000 get it or something like that.
Wow.
It's a really rare thing, and like it was rare for my family because nobody ever had heart issues, and this just popped up out of nowhere. So,
And so what would have happened? Is this like, was this technically like a heart attack or what is this?
so I, from my knowledge, I'm not sure. I think heart attacks are kind of when your heart kind of stops. I think, but it was like kind of like a reverse one, I'd say, because like my heart rate got up to, they said at the highest it was 219 beats per minute, which is higher than like exercising and stuff like that. So it was just literally my heart was going boom, 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 boom. You know,
Isn't it like ventricular? There's another word to it, where your heart is stuck essentially at a really fast pace. I've seen people do, I've seen like a video of somebody that had to get their heart essentially reset because it was too fast. It was like the same thing you're saying is like pounding and it doesn't slow down. So they essentially do like the, what do you call it? They use the defibrillator on them essentially to reset it. And is it similar to that or?
thankfully I didn't have to have anything like that.
No, okay.
But I guess you could say it's like in the same field.
Okay.
I was going through a lot of emotions through that because for one, like I was only like 9 years old. So
Sure.
I thought I was going to die. That was just going through that at that age was crazy. And like, even to this day, so they told me after like I had gotten the surgery done that it could possibly come back, like they could regrow,
Okay.
something like that. So every 5 years I have to go and get just heart tests just to see if like everything's okay. And I have to run on a treadmill and they stick like all those little wires and sticky things all over me and they just test my heart rate. But it's every 5 years just to prevent
it growing back. And have you had any incidents like that since?
I did in 2014. I had a scare. They told me because I was having a lot of pain on my left side. And that was when I was working at Jewel and I was pushing carts. So all in all, it was just me. They're saying the way I was pushing the carts was stressing out the left side of my body. But I was scared because like left side, I think that usually means heart attack or something like that too. So I remember I was like in pain, but I ended up just like pulling something on that side of my body. So,
okay. So it wasn't like anything related to that specific thing?
So
okay.
that was like the only scare. But other than that, after the surgery, I had to sit out from doing gym for 2 years. So I couldn't do gym up until I believe it was like fifth grade. And then I had to take like these pills that I had to crush up in applesauce like every few hours or something like that.
Every few hours?
Yeah. Yeah. So
how much that's a lot of medication. How much are you going? Like you have to have bottles of that, don't you?
Yeah. It was like those clear pills that have like the powder in it.
Yeah.
Just like crack it. I think I was taking like probably 6 or 7 a day. If I remember.
And how long were you doing? Was there a period where they're like, hey, do it for this long?
Yeah. It was pretty much the same amount of time I had to sit out.
Okay. For like a couple of years. Yeah. Okay. Wow. How was that? How did you manage when you were at school? How do you do that?
After that had happened, my parents switched me to public school and I didn't know anybody. And I remember I was explaining like, hey, I can't do gym, this and that, because I literally had to sit there in my regular clothes just in the corner while everyone was doing gym. And I remember this one kid in particular was bullying me about it. Like, oh, haha, you can't do gym, this and that. And I remember this one time he tripped me. We were in class and he tripped me and I fell on both my kneecaps and I couldn't get up because it hurt so bad. So it was different then because like, funny enough, there was someone at that school, at the Scarlet Oak School, where they had a bench dedicated to them.
Yeah.
And they had a similar thing where I guess they passed away while they're at the school. It was a heart related issue. So I remember when I did the transfer from St. Damien to Scarlet, I had to meet with the principal and stuff like that. And I was kind of real buddy with the principal at that point too, because it's like, like kind of special treatment. They were
sure. Well, but because they're more as adults, like you're more focused on their well-being because you know that they have something going on. So naturally they're just going to pay more attention to you. How was that? Like, did you feel weird about it? Did you like it? Did you like feel bad? I
felt weird only because like people, when you're like 9-10 years old, nobody's going to understand what you're going through, especially with that. So when I remember explaining it as best as I could at that age, and yeah, I just felt like people were kind of singling me out a little bit because I was like different.
Do you think it was jealousy of like more attention? Or do you think that there was just like like they just found a way to make fun of you because like made them seem funnier? Or
multiple factors. I feel like it could be for the people who didn't like gym. Maybe it was jealousy because I got to sit out and not have to climb. Because I remember they were doing that thing where you climb the rope all the way to the ceiling and stuff
yeah,
like
I remember that.
And just stuff. I feel like maybe people who didn't want to do gym were jealous.
Yeah.
I was like really skinny, so I mean, people were picking on me already for skinny, so that didn't help. And yeah, stuff like
so
that.
let me ask you, what is it like for you? You were 9 years old when that happened, right? So what is it like for you to figure out that you have to, like, there's something going on with you? Because like as a kid, when I was 8, I don't know if I told you this last time, when I was 8, I experienced a seizure, and it was stress induced according to the doctors because there was nothing else going on. And they basically were asking me, hey, they were asking my mom actually, like if I was going through anything like difficult, because there didn't appear to be anything underlying, like any type of like narcolepsy or any condition that would cause, or epilepsy that would cause me to just suddenly while I'm sleeping have a seizure. Yep. And so a lot of times they said that like that was if you're very young and you're very stressed, your brain can't handle that, and so eventually you short circuit. And so that's what, as a kid, that was like a thing that was my big thing that happened, medical thing that happened to me when I was a kid. And so, but for me, when that happened, like I was just like I was like scared because I didn't know what was going on, because I didn't know, I didn't experience it. Like I just woke up and I'm getting taken to the hospital. Yeah. So it's not like I experienced really anything happen. I just experienced like the fear that was around me. That was like, why am I in the hospital? Why am I getting probes on my head? Like I didn't know anything of what was going on. I just knew probes were getting put on my head. And the next thing I know, like, hey, they need to watch you sleep because something happened. And that's all I knew. So like for me, I was just more confused. And because it wasn't a follow-on issue, like I didn't have to deal with it like you did for 2 years. It was just a thing where I was like, oh, that was just like a freak thing. And then I was done with it. But for you, had to deal with it for 2 years. Like, do you remember yourself being worried? Like, do you remember fear? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it was pretty much the same as how you were feeling when you had yours, where I was just confused, scared, didn't know what was going to happen. I remember like, it's just like when it happened at that age, it's so vivid in my mind. Like I remember what I was eating at the hospital when I was having the surgery, like right after. I remember what I was watching. I remember I was watching like Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy after my surgery.
Yeah.
I couldn't move my legs for 72 hours after it. And
why is that?
Something about, I think they said like blood clots or something, but I couldn't move my legs. And I remember it's kind of crazy, but a nurse came in at like 4 in the morning. And I remember I got startled out of my sleep and I kicked the nurse like, in the chest. I was like, oh shit. So that was kind of funny, but other than that, like just the whole process of going through all that, it was definitely kind of traumatic and just never going to forget it.
What is I'd be curious to know, because my relationship with hospitals have been very bad most of my life. Yeah. Primarily because every time I was at the hospital, something pretty bad was going on. It wasn't like, hey, they're going in for a checkup, like, or they're going in for like a routine surgery and like everything's cool. Every time I was in the hospital, something really bad was happening. And so like, when I was 8, I went to the hospital for the seizures, or for this one seizure. And when I was like about in my teens was the next time. No, actually not. Actually, like maybe a year or two around that same age, my aunt had like a brain hemorrhage. And so it was pretty severe, and like everyone was just nervous. And so I remember that, like we were there to visit my aunt. And then I think like the next big event that happened where I was at the hospital was when I was like 14 and my uncle had passed away, and I went to visit him after he had open heart surgery, because he had gone to the hospital because he had originally stubbed his toe and it got infected. And because he was diabetic, I'm sure you know that anybody with diabetes, their biggest their biggest enemy is being overweight, is because like their blood flow as a diabetic is already not great. And when you are also overweight, your blood flow is even worse because you have a bad heart. And so he kind of let it go for a while and didn't, like, my family, we don't go to the hospital. Like, nobody does that. Like, unless you're dying, like, nobody goes to the hospital. Yeah. And I think that's a bad habit, like for us to have. And something that I am trying to change in myself is to go to take care of myself, like check in, right? Because everybody says prevention is better than trying to deal with the damage afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I do try to, like, every year go and get myself just a general checkup. And the reason is because of that is, like, my uncle didn't go to the hospital or didn't go get checkups. He didn't take care of his diet. Like, so if you're diabetic, you have a bad diet and you're older, because he was around 60, right? You're setting yourself up for pretty rough event. And so, like, what happened is he stubbed his toe. So he went to get that checked out and it was getting infected. And they go, hey, you need surgery for that because that's infected. And so then they're like, but before we do surgery, we have to check your heart, the condition of your heart, because you have to be healthy enough for surgery, I think, at a certain age. They didn't check. I've had a medical procedure, but I've never had, like, a surgery, right? So I never got checked for that. So I don't know if you experienced, like, having to get your heart checked for how healthy it is, but
yeah, just at that time when I had the surgery,
right?
Because I was the same as you. Like, I never go to the hospital unless it's serious. So yeah, I never had that.
So then he apparently got that done, and they were like, your arteries are like something like 96 to 98% clogged. Like, wow. You shouldn't be walking. Is how bad it was. And so they're like, we need to do, like, open heart surgery, like as soon as possible. And like, it wasn't, according to my mom, because I wasn't there when that happened. According to my mom, he wasn't that worried about it initially, because he was just like, I mean, like, all right, but how long am I going to be out? Like, and they're like, no, like, it's not a routine thing. Like, this is like life and death. Like, if you don't get this done, you're not going to survive. Wow. And so he had to go get heart surgery for that. And it was very scary because when we went to see him, I didn't know the full details of it. Again, that's like another thing of nobody really talks about, like, when things are stressful, like, no one says, like, explains anything. And I think that's the scarier part, is that no one wants to ask the question of, like, how bad is it? And I think that was the case too. Cause, like, nobody thought he was going to die. Everyone seemed surprised when he died. Because everyone thought he was going to make it. But it's like, if you're having open heart surgery, like, how could you not know? Like, how could you not assume that maybe it's really severe? And so, cause my mom was telling me, like, yeah, it was very surprising. He just suddenly went. And for me, when I went to visit him, I went to see him like a day or two before he passed. And, when I went in the hospital, I still describe it as, like, it was a very heavy feeling when I walked in, of just like, whoa, like, something, I didn't understand what's going on, but something's going on.
Yeah,
it's
like surreal.
It's surreal, like, how the pressure, it felt like just very thick in the room. I don't know what it is. That might be something else, but, like, I could tell something was going on. I don't know if have you ever felt just like a feeling of a feeling that no one just wants to say, like, everyone's afraid, like, you can feel it, but no one wants to say it.
Yeah. I would say with my immediate family, like aunts and uncles and stuff like that, when I had my problem, it's kind of similar. Like, nobody wanted to ask too many questions at the time, because I feel like it would, like, ruffle some feathers with my parents and stuff like that. So I do get that, and that shouldn't be a common thing as it is. You know, people should be able to know when stuff's going on like that, and it's just kind of sad as humans, like, we're not.
So the question is, like, how do you navigate that conversation, right? Like, do you explain that? What's the right age, right? You're a father. If you're in a situation, right, where you, like, something is going on, whether it's a family member or maybe it's even like someone, like, in your immediate family, right? Like, at what age do you think it's appropriate to be, like, transparent?
Me personally, I like to ask those questions. I feel like I'm, like, one of the few ones in my family that just ask it, like, right then and there. But I feel like 16 and beyond, only because, like, at that point, it's like you're starting to more understand like life stuff and how like serious everything is.
Okay. What do you think about, like, let's say, because kids ask a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. How would you explain something like to a child? Like, let's say they want to know, like, hey, like, what's going on? Because as a kid, I didn't really ask questions. Like, that's one of the things that I'm told is I just didn't really ask things. Like, I kind of just was a spectator. I feel like for most of my life, I've been like that, like a wallflower.
Yeah.
Of just kind of in the background, seeing things happen and just observing. And I didn't really ask questions. But I know that most kids like to ask questions. Like, what's going on with that? How do you deal? Well, you don't deal with that yet, right? Because your son's not at that age yet.
Yeah, not yet, no.
But how do you think you'll handle that? What would you do if he starts asking questions about serious things?
I might be more upfront. From a personal standpoint, I had a lot of family pass away at a young age. And I remember thinking back, my parents would not tell me right at the time, like, what was going on. It would just be, oh, they died. Oh, they passed away. And I remember going to like funerals and stuff like that. And this is going to sound kind of weird, but I feel like since I didn't really know what was going on and I didn't like prepare myself. I mean, you're really not supposed to prepare yourself.
Yeah. Like, how do you,
anyway, but, like, I felt like since I was so in shock that they died, like I wouldn't even be crying at the funerals. I'd just be standing there, like just taking everything in. Kind of like what you said, like being like a wallflower. But that's changed as time's going on. Like now when I go to wakes and funerals, like I cry it out right there. But
sure.
I remember just because like, I feel like since they left that information out a little bit, it'd just be shock.
Like you just didn't grasp.
Yeah.
Like the severity of what's going on, like, or the seriousness, I guess, of the situation.
Yeah. So I feel like when it comes to my son, I feel like I might be a little bit more upfront. I'm not going to be too much in detail. But just give it how it is.
And that's what I've heard, right? Like I've seen some interviews with like people in the childcare industry, and they go, we try to give them the information and normalize like that things like that happen, and that we shouldn't be afraid of them, and to have the conversation. Hey, this is what happened. Because if like we lie to them, when they get older, they're gonna be shocked.
Yep.
And it's going to be more difficult for them to traverse that if they don't feel it's normal. If like they thought it was something, and then because that happened to me a lot. Actually, like one of the biggest shocks that I realized was how like I explained to you last time, like how adult relationships function versus how I thought they functioned. Because a lot of times I didn't have information. My issue was I just didn't have information. I just saw things and just made assumptions. And then if things weren't clarified to me, I would only find out when I experienced them myself, that it's like, oh, that wasn't at all how I thought it was. And no one really kind of guided me through that experience. So then I hear that that's like a thing. That's why it's important to not lie to your kid, like to say, hey, this is what's happening. And, if they have any questions, to just be transparent, but not like be too in detail. Because the details of it are just kind of like a thing that might be unnecessary, but you can still tell them what's going on. And so that's why I'm curious to ask you, because I'm experiencing through you now because you have a son. And so I'm curious what your thought process is there.
And I could honestly say too, because girls are more emotional than boys naturally. I feel like even to tell kids that at a young age, it's good to see their emotions, how they react to that, because like, as men, they say like, yeah, you can't really show emotion and you look weak and this and that. Honestly, I feel like getting emotions out of like boys at a younger age, I feel like would help them be easier to like talk about that stuff later on in life. Because I feel like since I was pushing back everything that I had going on and stuff like that, there's just that big lull up until like my late teenage years to where I was actually comfortable about talking about stuff.
Yeah.
Just by little, it'd just get better and better day by day, where I'd be able to talk more and more.
And so like nobody really normalized that to you. And so because of that, like it's something that you found out later in life, and something that like, I mean, like I think not everybody, but a lot of people are coming to that realization. That's why we're having conversations like this. And you're seeing a lot of other people, not just us, right? Like having these similar conversations about like, hey, I didn't know this was like a thing. And until you get to adulthood, and it's like, it kind of slaps you by surprise of how to even manage. Speaking of like funerals, right? Like, how did your view change on funerals? Because I'll tell you, like when I was younger, nobody really that I knew of, we didn't go to like not a lot of people were dying when I was young. So like when my uncle died, that was like the first big like death that happened in my immediate family was that. And I've been to a couple of wakes now, and like going up to from the time I was like 14, I went to say goodbye to my uncle. Like I went up to his casket, and like I just kind of like, I was like, whoa, like what? Like I don't know how to even describe it. I just felt more like wow, like what's going, like what is this? Like what's happening? And like I know he's passed away, but what, like I don't know. I was so confused about the process, and how am I supposed to feel? Like what? Like oh man, it was just trying to figure out like when I first went up to his casket, and I was just sitting there like, so he's like gone, like it was just one of those. It's very surreal. I didn't know how to I didn't have the tools to process it. That's what I was trying to tell you. I just didn't have the tools to process it. And one of my close friends, when his dad died, now I'm an adult. I'm like in my like early 20s, and I go and I went up to his casket, and I had I wouldn't say like a close relationship with him, but I liked his dad, and his dad, I imagine like me, like we had good conversations and stuff, like every time I would see him, he'd be excited to see me, be like, hey, like Josh, nice to see you again. And so we had like very cordial relationship. And so when I went up, it's just, again, as an adult, when I went up to his casket, it was a different experience than when I was like 14.
Yeah, definitely.
I went up to his casket, and I was like I accepted that he was gone, but I did want to, like, how like people say, sometimes people like talk to like the body, and they like say final messages like, hey, thank you for this, or whatever messages you have. I finally like felt that, and like I was like because I didn't say it to him when he was alive, and that's when it really struck me that like, wow, we really do wait too long to have that. And I went up, and I remember like that was the first time I started noticing emotions while I was saying like, hey, thank you for being so kind to me. Like, thank you for, and I was having a full conversation with him in my mind while I was sitting there, like paying my respects. Right. It's so different from the time that I'm like 14 to the time that I'm in my early 20s, like realizing that like, it's a different viewpoint. Yeah. It's a different perspective. Like it's more real.
100%. I agree on that. Because this leads off of what we were just talking about. But so when I was a kid, I had a lot of like grandparents pretty much just pass away naturally, and through normal passings. I feel like what also helped bring out my emotions was I had specifically 3 family members. One drowned, one got killed in a car crash, and one committed suicide. So the one that drowned was the first one. I think I was like 14 or 15. Seeing him in the casket, that was a shock, because he was only like 2 years older than me.
Ooh.
So
when was this? How old were you?
I believe it happened in 2012. So I think I was around 15 or 16.
Okay.
That's like sophomore year, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
So that one was the first big shock. The next one was my uncle, who got killed in a car crash right on 107th and LaGrange Road. He was having a medical emergency when he was driving. And it's so weird, because if you go down LaGrange, right between 111th and I think 107th, there's like this little gap that's open. Like the rest, it's all like concrete barrier. And then there's just this one spot, there's a gap. So he was driving south, when he was having the medical emergency, he veered off, went right through that gap, crossed into oncoming traffic. Surprisingly, didn't get hit by oncoming traffic, but he went up a hill and he clapped a tree. So seeing him in the casket, because they did an open casket for that. He had blunt head force trauma.
Oh my God.
So they had to rebuild his face. And I remember just seeing him, the way they rebuilt his face, he looked like an alien.
Oh, wow.
Because his eyes were kind of closer together. When they rebuilt it, his eyes were like stretched.
Yeah.
And I remember his nose just looked like a ball of clay. So when I seen that one really hit because I was actually closer to that uncle than I was my dad because that's my dad's brother.
Sure.
But I'd always spend time over there. He taught me a lot of stuff. Like I painted a shed when I was like, I think 13.
Yeah.
He was teaching me how to use hand tools, just stuff like that. And he was also the police officer that I mentioned in the last one. So he had a big impact on me doing the criminal justice stuff that I'm doing now. So that one was a heavy hitter.
How do you think what did you feel when you saw him, and did you have questions for him? Like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was just like, I couldn't mentally grasp that one. So I remember that was like the first real funeral that I bawled my eyes out. And then it was from there on out, because I've been to a lot of funerals for like former classmates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I always make a reason to just, when I'd say a prayer and I just touch their hand. And it's just like my form of bonding. Like try to say my last goodbye. I always try to do that. But it's just like, like what you said, there's so much I wish I could say, and then you just can't say it, so that one was a heavy hitter. And then, my uncle committed suicide, in 2020. That one was rough too, because, this was on my mom's side. We fell off with him. He was in my life as a kid, like up until I was like 5-6 years old. Him and my dad had some bad argument and issues and stuff like that. And then my uncle barely spoke to any of us after that. So my mom would just rarely keep in contact with him. And then we finally just started talking to him again. And like, I think it was like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
And then, that just shocked us when 2020 came around. They did an open casket for him too, but he had shot himself in the head. And I remember you could see where it went in, and they just filled it in with whatever they fill it in with. And that was a surreal one too. So it's like me seeing a lot of people that I was close to die in like tragic ways. It affects you a little different too. You know what I mean? Because it's like medical is one thing, but then when it's like their lives are cut short when it should be longer.
Yeah.
That's a whole different feeling. You know what I mean?
And so leading off of that, like how did it change your perspective? Like, do you feel like, for me, like I mentioned to you, after the events of like seeing going to the wake of my friend's dad, I tried to be more intentional about like how I feel about people. Like, hey, I really appreciated this. Like, thank you for doing this. Like, if I see something wrong and I see it within my own friend group, I tried to do it within my own friend group, which is like when we have disagreements, because we're going to have them, our minds are not perfectly in sync. Right. And so, just like with family members, like I want to have the ability for us to, have a conversation when it matters. Right. Because like a lot of things I see in my family is that we get mad. Nobody communicates that something upset them. And then you have years of like not speaking to each other and just holding that. And then just getting to a point where somebody passes away. And that's when you go, oh, like, I didn't get to say this. I didn't get to tell them that, actually they were really great in this way. And they made an impact in my life in this way. And this fight didn't represent that. And so like, I think what it changed in me is, was just being more intentional about like, hey, we can be upset. Like we can have a disagreement. But the important part is that like, because I care about my friends and because you trust that they do too, that we can come back and say, hey, you know what? Like, this is, why I was upset. And I didn't mean, if I said something out of line, like I didn't mean that, like I said that because A, B, and C, and it wasn't okay. And so like, what can we do to prevent that from happening? Like, how can we improve this relationship? Yeah. That's the biggest thing that I try to incorporate into my friend group. And luckily I feel like it is working.
Yep.
especially in these last couple of years since I've been in therapy and been doing my work to heal, I've tried to implement that like effectively, like no, we can't let it go. 'Cause sometimes I'll have like feelings about, like, the old part of me will want to shut it down. Yeah. The old part of me will want to be like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Yep. That makes me too upset, or A, B, and C. Right. But I have to, like, talk to that person. Does that make sense? Like
100%. I'm the exact same way. And that is the best way to handle it. Because you never know when someone's last day is. And I've had way too many people just exit my life at just snaps of a finger. So that's the best way.
And then I realized when I was a kid, I thought, and we're getting off topic, but like, I genuinely think like this is a super important part of the conversation, which is that, like, when I was a kid, when I was younger, like, I didn't realize, like, the impact that has of the difference it makes to sit down and go, hey, this is what happened.
Yep.
Because you create stories in your head about what's happening. And if you don't have that conversation with that person, there is no clarification of that story. So that story remains the truth.
Exactly.
And having the ability to, like, sit down and go, hey, this is what happened, is the difference between a healthy and unhealthy relationship. How did you apply it in your life?
So, like, whenever I do have confrontations with people, which is very rare because I'm, like, not really a confrontational type of guy, but, like, problems within my friend group or family members or stuff like that, I try to make it fixed as soon as possible. Like, I don't like going to sleep feeling that someone's upset with me. If that makes sense. I just don't like that feeling, because I just know I'm not that type of guy, you know, like, I'm not out here to start trouble with people or nothing like that. So, yeah, I just try to fix my issues when I do have them, you know, as soon as I can.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And one of the things, just to get back on topic again, one of the things you mentioned to me before, the last time we talked, was an incident in which you experienced a robbery.
Yep.
What can you talk me through that? What would happen?
So up to this point in life, I feel like this one affected me the most, even more than the heart one, because just running off from the heart one, real quick, I have an issue now with running that I can't run for long periods of time.
Sure.
Because I have to, like, watch my heart rate and stuff like that. So that's, like, the only long lasting effect I could say I have from my heart issues. But the robbery one, I was literally minding my business, and a lot of people, it's like on Facebook and stuff, I seen a post where it says Chicago is the only place where you could be minding your business and you could be thrown into a problem. And
yeah.
That's happened to me a few times, but this one was really a different one. It was 2013. It was around, I think, October. And so that was kind of around the time that my brother was having his issues, like, starting up with his autism and stuff like that. So a lot of times I'd just go for walks at nighttime just to clear my mind and listen to music and stuff like that. And I was going for a walk. I literally made it right down my block, like, not even like 500 yards away from my house. And I seen this dude coming down, because I live on a hill, and then there's also another hill where the other block is, where they both,
like an intersection.
Yeah, right where the intersection meets, it's like two hills that go down. So I'm walking down my hill, and then I see this guy coming, and he's wearing a hood, and it was about, I think, 7 p.m. And it was like, you know, because October the sun sets, I think, around like 5:30, 6 o'clock. Yep. So it was already dark out, and there was these vacant apartments that were right by my house. The city had just bought them, so there wasn't, like, a lot of tenants still living there. They were starting to board up the empty ones,
right,
stuff like that. So I was right there at the intersection. The dude's calling my name. I was like, hey, check this out. So me being kind of gullible, I stood there and I wanted to see what this guy had to say. So then when he walked up, I recognized him because he went to our school and stuff like that. He was, like, I think 1 or 2 grades above us. I'm just going to call him John Doe. I'm not going to say his name. But everyone who's close to me knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So basically, comes up, gets all in my face. He's like, oh, you got the time on you? And I'm like, because at that time I had a flip phone. Like, my parents, because when I was in high school, they didn't want me to have a smartphone yet. So I still was rocking the flip phone, like, you know, sophomore, junior year, whatever that was.
Yeah.
So I showed him the time on it, and he's like, "Hey, I got to show you something over here." So he was pointing behind the apartment building, and me being gullible, went back there. So he was like showing me something because there was a stairwell I remember that went down for like a laundry room for the building, and then there was a staircase going up. So he was pointing down. He's like, "Hey, look at that. There's something." I think he's like said there's something sitting there or something. So I went to go look, and I remember he pushed me from behind, and I hit the staircase that was going up.
Yeah.
And then I turned around, and then he like got on top of my knees so I couldn't move.
Yeah.
And he was like checking my chest, see if I had like chains on and stuff like that. He was checking my pockets. And he's like, "Oh, this is like, saying, oh, you better not scream, better not say nothing, blah, blah, blah." I smelled liquor on his breath. So
you were that close to him.
Yeah. Like he was like face to face with me, and he knew who I was and he knew where I lived. So I was trying to tell him like, "Hey, I'm just going for a walk. Let me go, this and that." And he's like, "No, you're going to take me to your house." It was just thinking back, it was so vivid. Like me being scared because like also when he was on my legs, he was doing this with his chest. Like he had
like he had a gun or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking back, I don't think he did for that robbery, but a little fast forward, he got caught for having a gun later though. In a different thing because he ended up getting locked up. So let me backtrack a little. So I was afraid that he really did have a gun.
Sure.
So him knowing where I lived, at first I was going to try to walk towards like the Park District right over here because it was just a straight shot from where I was at. But just me being scared, and I didn't know if he actually had a gun or not. Walked him into my house. I remember my mom was doing dishes, and I walked in because I had my keys on me, and I opened the door. She turns around, and she's like, "Oh, who is that?" And I just told her like, "Oh, it's just a friend." And I had a staircase that goes up right when you open the front door, so he was like right behind me, like pushing me forward. I remember I went up the stairs, and he was right behind me. He went into my room, and he was just like going through all my stuff and stuff like that. I had a Pikachu Pokemon bank full of quarters and like nickels and stuff like that. I remember he took the handfuls and was just putting them in his pockets. I'd mentioned in the last podcast I used to do YouTube videos.
Yeah.
He stole my camcorder. He stole a PSP, a Nintendo DS, and something else. But yeah, he pretty much just shoved everything in his pockets and then was like, just anything he could fit on his body. And then he told me to go back outside. So I went down, and he was still like right behind me, walking me down my stairs. And then when I went out the door, I remember my mom was just like standing by the staircase looking, and she was trying to talk to him. And the guy wasn't saying anything. He just walked right past her. So then we made it outside, went down my sidewalk, went to my driveway. And then he told me, he's like, "If you say anything about it, I'm going to come back and kill you and your parents."
So I'm assuming your mom at this point is suspicious.
Yep. She was suspicious as soon as she seen him walk in because he still had his hood on. And he was like looking down, but like pushing me forward. And she knows that like at that time, I didn't really have friends in the house. So for me to barge in with somebody like literally like just pushing me like that, I knew she knew something was up.
So like, what is your thought process? Because you're in your own house, right? And you think this guy has a gun.
Yep.
So what are you thinking?
I thought that was it. I thought he was actually gonna like shoot me or something like that. Like, because I never went through something like that. And when I can honestly say, because I was literally just gonna go for a walk, it's the fact that you get so caught off guard. It could literally happen to anybody. That's why like up after that happened, I literally, whenever I'm out in public, nighttime, I'm always looking like all around me. I'm tense. I'm very suspicious of people walking near me or past me, anything like that. That was the long-lasting effect I had out of that because you just never know. You just never know what people are capable of doing.
How do you prepare for you to suddenly think about your life? Like, is this it? How do you prepare for that? There's really is no way to prepare, especially that young, because at that time you're just going for a walk. Yep. Like that's the plan.
Didn't think anything of this happening. So it's like when he told me that he was going to come back, kill me and my parents, I knew where he lived.
Okay.
He lived literally right up that hill, not even half a block away from me. So I thought, like, if I did say something, there'd be retaliation. I know that if I told my dad, because me and my mom made a pact, don't ever tell my dad this happened, because he would flip shit. He would flip so bad if he knew that happened. And I know he would want me to try to press charges and this and that. So I never said anything.
And so not telling your dad, like, how is he not going to find out? Like,
so I just told my mom, like, look, because my brother, I don't know where my brother was, but he wasn't home that day, I remember. So it was just me and my mom that were there. I was just telling her, like, just please don't say anything. Please don't. And like, I remember immediately after it happened, my face was like blood red. Like I was boiling mad that happened.
Yeah.
And I let myself like be that vulnerable and gullible. So it hit different. It just hit different after that happened. Like I've never been the same since.
But you know now.
Yeah. It made me smarter.
But what I mean by that is, now that wasn't your fault.
I think he knew I wasn't going to like talk to him or say anything about it. Like he must have knew that I was already kind of the quiet kid. So
Do you think he knew your friends?
Yeah, no, he definitely knew people I hung out with. And that's the crazy thing about it too, because after that happened, I was telling my friends about it. And I'm like, yeah, this guy did me dirty, man. Like, and I'm not going to expect them to drop talking to him, because he was like, that guy was cool with a lot of people and the bad kids and stuff like that. And like the few of my friends that would hang around with them, like I wasn't expecting them to like just be like, oh, screw this guy, blah, blah, blah. But I wanted them to know, because if he did it to me, he could do it to anybody else. And moving forward, funny enough, he did. But he did it to, I was showing Dayon before the interview. There's an ABC7 article where he had robbed two 16-year-olds, and he had gotten into their car. Mm-hmm. Like he somehow like asked them for a ride or something at the BP over here, got into their car, brought them kind of near where I was robbed at. It's kind of same area. And he robbed them there. He took all their stuff, but they actually reported it. So like he got caught up for that. He did have a gun on him that time though, I believe.
Well, so there's a lot going on. So I just want to figure out, let's backtrack to, so this happens, right? Like, does he just like take you outside and take off, or?
Yeah. So how I mentioned that some of the apartments were boarded up. I stood in the driveway because I was still in shock. I watched where he went. He ran to one of the ones that still had people living in it.
Okay.
So.
And he didn't live there?
Yeah, no, it was like because I remember seeing the guy who lived there. It was one of his buddies or something like that.
Okay.
So I don't know if he was like stashing the stuff he stole there or what, but like he knew that getting me right there, he could get away with it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
so he'd been watching you for a while.
Possibly. Because I used to take a lot of walks, but like, I don't know if he saw me as like a target even when I would hang out at the park district and he'd see me. But yeah, I think he just saw that he knew I was quiet and vulnerable, I think. So he caught me off guard. And like I said, man, it's ever since then, it's changed my whole view of like just being out at nighttime and going to gas stations at night, anything like that, man. Like, cause I'm always suspect of people too.
Sure.
And even just like another little side note, kind of the same thing happened to my dad in 2021 where he got carjacked on a side street in Chicago. So it's like, it could happen to anybody, man. So I feel like with how our area is going now, it's changing a little bit. Just like there's a lot more crime and stuff. It's good I feel like it's good for me to speak on this type of stuff because it could happen to anybody.
Well, here's the thing. Like, so there's the thing that happened to you, like the robbery. And then there's like what happens after. I think like that part is the least of your worries, because now you have this thing where it follows you. Right. Yep. So like, what's the plan now? Because when something like that happens, right? Like, Okay. So now, so you can't tell your dad, right? So off the bat, you've experienced something traumatic and you can't tell your dad.
Yep.
Okay. So then what is your mom's response?
She was just sorry that it happened to me. Like she wished that she could have called the cops or something because she knew like something was up there. But like, she just got caught off guard by it too, because I literally busted through the door with this guy like on my tail. You know what I mean? So, she wishes she could have just did more in that sense, but what could you do? You know, who would have known? And I feel comfortable speaking on this now because this is really crazy, but everyone has karma. So when he got locked up, I think he had other previous things like cases and stuff he had because he was doing shit to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, he ended up dying in prison.
Wow.
So if there's one thing I could say, karma always gets everybody. It always does. You don't have to do any type of thing. Like I was so upset about that for the longest time. And when I heard that, I got closure. So it's crazy.
What do you think? What did you feel immediately after, and how do you feel about it now? Because you mentioned the fact that like you were very angry, and what was the anger? Where do you think the anger came from specifically?
Just the fact that like, because like I would hang out with the bad kids and stuff like that back then. And like, I had like that kind of thuggish look going on and stuff. Like I would always like tell myself like, man, nobody's ever gonna get me, this and that. So I kind of took it personal when it did actually happen to me, because like I said, it's just when it can happen to anybody like that. Just the fact that you don't expect it. Literally, it's just that.
It's interesting you say that, because like everybody talks about when you're young, you have a feeling of invincibility of like, yeah, like that wouldn't happen to me. Yep. And at some point that bubble pops.
That was the time. Yeah. That was the time for me.
That was the time for you. And so do you think like there's a conversation that can be had about stuff like that? Or do you think like, there's just no way to really prepare mentally for something like that to happen?
I can honestly say if you live in an area where you know there's a lot of crime, try to prepare yourself. But like I said, it can happen anywhere though.
That's true.
You know, so it's like just with maybe I could say the way the world's changing, right? Like a lot of people are tense, a lot of people are on edge, a lot of people don't have money. You know, just you got to factor in stuff like that moving forward in life. Like even like the riots and stuff that were happening in 2020, like that was spur of the moment too.
Yeah.
Like, nobody knew that was going to happen. I feel like it's just always good to be prepared and just kind of just have some knowledge what to do. Even like if to try to fight off an attacker, just like kind of know just for prevention tactics.
Just educate yourself on that. Yeah, I think that's true. And for kids, right? Like for example, teaching them self-defense and getting them involved in stuff like that. I mean, do you think that's something worth doing? Yeah,
100%. Because it's funny you say that. I did Taekwondo for like a few weeks. When
I was
really?
In
like fourth grade. But the minute when that happened to me, man, I didn't remember anything. I didn't remember.
It's different, right? Like when you're going through an adrenaline dump, and I haven't experienced anything like that, but it's what I hear all the time is like once the adrenaline hits you, it's a different. You're not able to think critically. Like you're not able to sit and be like, okay, what do I need to do here? Oh yeah, I have to do this. That disappears.
Yeah, it's literally just your mind goes blank.
You're entirely going on muscle memory at that point, because you just don't have the ability to think critically. It's just get out of there. Like get out. It's the fight or flight, right? Or freeze.
Yeah. Like honestly, like thinking back, I can honestly say the minute you could catch the robber or offender off guard, take that chance. Just take it. Because I knew there was at one point when he was like checking my chest and stuff, checking my pockets, I could have like mollywopped him or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but like I said,
but then again, if he had a gun,
who would have known? You know what I'm saying? I could have just been blasted right there, and that would have been it. So.
The point I think is that, because sometimes we think about, and this happens to me all the time. Sometimes we think about what could I have done? Like what could I have done better? And you think about it over and over again. I don't know if this happened to you, but this is something that I hear a lot, and I overthink things to death. Yeah. And so like if I were in a situation like that, I would be thinking about like, what could I have done? Like where could I have gotten him? Where could I have escaped or prevented him from walking into my house? Like that's the stuff that I would be like thinking on losing sleep over. Right. But let's look at it realistically. Like you weren't expecting it. Right.
Yep.
Caught you off guard and B, like you knew of this guy. Yeah, like it's not like he was a stranger.
That's what made it even crazier too. Like that's what made me not want to say anything either, because he knew me, like knew of me, but I knew more. I feel like I knew more of him than he knew of me.
Why do you say that?
So like I knew prior to that happening, like I knew he was like shiesty, but I never thought that like he would get me like that. I do feel like because I smelled liquor on his breath. He was probably drunk. He was known to pop pills. So who knows if he had a pill in his system too.
Maybe.
Because the way he was talking didn't sound right either.
Yeah.
Like it was all like kind of like whispery and breathy. So and that wasn't how this guy talked normally. So I feel like there was like factors into that. I felt like maybe he kind of felt like he was invincible and he could just do anything.
Right.
Because he was like high. So I feel like that had kind of a factor, but it's just the fact that like he knew where I lived. So if I was to say anything, I feel like 100% there would be some form of retaliation, because he has like, I think like sisters and other family that live in that house too. So it's like, I didn't want to be like a marked house and then have issues with my dad, even though I was already kind of having issues with him at that time anyway. And my brother's issues. And there's just another thing added to that shit list I had going on. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't say anything. And I was mad about it for probably a good, honestly, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get over it. And I felt like the trauma from that kind of froze me and it kept me stuck in like a rut, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like a feeling of, because when that stuff like that happens, right? Like you feel like, in some sort of way, what's the word? You feel like a part of you has been taken. Like, what's the word for it? Violated to some degree.
Yeah. I've lost like respect to myself a little bit from it, because it's like, I don't know. I downplayed myself. I thought I could, like what you were saying, I felt like nobody could touch me. And then when it did happen, it was just like degrading.
That's a good word.
That's the word I was looking for, degrading. So I had to rebuild myself after that. But like I said, I was a lot smarter, just moving forward. Like when people look suspicious, when people ask you to check it out, don't check it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
So, that type of
and
stuff.
that's like a joke like that people say now. Yep. Like I've seen videos about like when you're in Chicago and then like people saying like when somebody says specifically check it out, don't check it out.
When I saw that same one a few years ago too, and I'm like, I had to watch it a few times because I was actually laughing. I'm like, wow, this is so true. It's literally so true. That's like, I guess the common robber phrase to use. Like, hey, check it out.
Yeah.
So, and honestly though, like with it freezing me like that, like it was just a lot to. I mean, it didn't help that I had everything else going on in life too.
Right.
Like that was like right when things were really starting to kick up. So like I said, another thing added to that list, and man, that was just a very, very rough time in life that I went through. And like, I self-analyze it a lot still to this day, because there's still so much I'm like, just rehashing and just trying to comprehend from that time period. Like I went through it, didn't think of it, but now I'm like, really like looking back into it.
How do you feel about it today?
About the robbery? Or
like you mentioned the anger then. How do you emotionally, when you think back on it, right? Do the emotions come back? How do you see it now?
A little bit. I mean, it's the fact. So let's say he wasn't dead.
Yeah.
He didn't die in prison. I'd probably still be really mad.
Really?
But I feel like since I got that closure and that like kind of like I told you so, karma, whatever you want to call it, that just goes to show me that it's not worth really retaliating anything in life, because I could have messed up my whole life too. Like either, let's say he did shoot me, right? Like I could have been paralyzed. I could have lost organs, something, you know what I mean? I could have been dead. So it just me thinking like, I just let God handle it. That was the best way I could think back on that.
Let's say, for example, he was he was still around, right? It could have also been where I've seen stuff like this eat up people, where it's like their whole existence is around like retaliation. Their whole existence is around being angry about this. And, you know, we don't do a very good job as a society storing or dealing with, especially men, dealing with that kind of violation. Yep. Right. Yeah. Because if you're a guy, it's even worse. Like the feeling of, not that it's not bad for women, but like for like a man, that we're taught that we're supposed to be strong and be leaders and that be able to fend off attackers. Right. That's like there's like, we establish like, what's the value, like a self-worth over that. And so like to lose that, especially as a young man, when you're trying to figure yourself out still, and you're trying to figure out like what you can handle and what you can't handle, to figure that out that early, like it wouldn't be beyond belief if you were still around for you to have still been trying to get that one back. Right. But then what would that mean for you? Right. Like, your whole life has revolved around this one guy. You've given him power. Right.
And like, let's say like I did retaliate and he was just minding his business, and I'd be the one in prison. You know what I mean? They wouldn't be able to backtrack on that type of stuff because time has passed. You know what I mean? So that's why, like, I feel like just retaliating any of that stuff for me, I wouldn't do it. But if, let's say I was to get robbed now, at least I know what to do, what not to do, just how I'd approach it. And at least like I could kind of sense and maybe be able to talk them down a little bit, because like I feel like after that happened, all that built up anger, it really changed my just overall attitude. Like I felt like I was just angrier about everything.
Do you view people I'm curious, do you view people who commit those kinds of crimes? Do you see them as like less, or do you think you'd be able to talk to them as a human? Because like the way that I see it is, as much as angry as I'd be, like I would wonder what's going on with that person for you to have to do something like, or to get to that point. Do you see it that way, or do you not?
Yeah. So there's a funny story. My younger brother had this buddy. He was kind of following, because he actually knew that guy who robbed me too. Like he'd hang around their circle, knew who that was, but he was following the same footsteps. And I remember after that happened, like I'm telling him like, hey, none of that's worth it, man. You're going to throw your life away, this and that. And he'd respect me. He understood, but then he'd still go and do his stuff. But he had like respect for me because he saw me, because he didn't have a father either. Like, like I remember his whole family life, like his mom was pretty messed up. And then his dad was like partially in his life, but not like, he was into drugs and stuff like that too. So I remember like he kind of saw me as like a father figure a little bit, just because I was a little bit older.
Yeah.
But I think it was the fact that I was like trying to tell him right from wrong. He just grew like a respect for me. Never did anything to me, but then he'd still be out there, you know, messing around with them, stealing stuff from them too. Not like robbing people, but just like taking stuff.
Sure.
You know, breaking into cars. So I feel like it depends on how far gone you are, because when I was talking to him, he was already kind of far gone.
Yeah.
If you could talk to somebody, like let's say it's their first robbery, they're scared or something like that, and you try to talk them down, might be a possibility you get them to, you know, give up and just give your stuff back or whatever, you know. But I feel like if someone's too far gone, man, they're not gonna really want it. They'll take it in, but they're not gonna listen.
Like I think about like, would I speak to, even if I was afraid, would I still be able to speak to that person with some form of dignity, like basic human dignity, even if he doesn't treat me that way? Right. Because like I've heard a lot of people talk about like in psychology, right? Like do your best to not base your treatment on others based on how they've treated you. And that's what I'm trying to, I think about when I hear that story like that, about like, if that were to happen to me, you know, would I still be able to give them what they want, right? Because my things aren't worth my life, right? And still be able to say like, you know, I'll get you anything, you can take whatever you want, and then just like still speak to them as a human being. And like, how do you think you would handle that today?
So I feel like a big factor into that because like I was saying, like I smelled liquor on this guy's breath. I think he was possibly off a pill. I feel like if they're high or drunk and you try talking to them,
it's not going to go nowhere.
That won't go nowhere. So I feel like if they're soberly doing that, I feel like that has a higher chance of talking them down. And if they have a heart too.
Sure.
Like let's say they're robbing somebody because they need money for like to feed their kids or something like that. They may be a little bit more understanding. I feel like it might be a stretch, but they may understand.
You might make it might be, for example, you might still be able to link to their soul, so to speak.
Yeah. Cause like, let's say like he robs you, but you're with your kids. Right? And then like it might be like a sudden realization, like, what am I doing? Could be, but it's just there's so much psychology behind this stuff.
Yeah.
Like
there's really no way to know, especially when it's happening to you like that. I think the best thing, and we'll kind of close it off with this last section of questions. I think like the biggest thing is you can't control it, right? No matter what you think you can do, like everybody can take a million lessons in self-defense. We could all sit here and be like, I'm the most prepared person ever now because of something like that. And then something will happen and it'll catch you off guard. We're all human beings. Like sometimes you come home from work, you're tired. You don't think about, oh, I got to be ready for somebody to rob me. Even if you've been through something like that, right? So there are some days where I come home and I sit in my car. I remember one of my junior Marines saying, cause he used to work for, those companies that like take money from, like they pick up money and drop off money from certain like retail locations, like Brinks.
Oh yeah. Like a bank.
Yep.
Yeah, okay,
So like he used to do that stuff. And so he used to tell me that biggest thing he thinks about is like when he's sitting in his car, he doesn't sit in his car. Like if he's done driving, he doesn't sit in like on his phone, and because he says that that's something that is commonly what happens with people when they get robbed, like carjacked, is that they're sitting and not paying attention to their surroundings, and it's late at night, right? Like you just get home from work. And so it's like, even if you work that, right, and you're the most prepared person, you have a firearm on you or whatever, sometimes there will be days you will come home and nothing happens to you. So you're just like, whatever. Yep. And that's the day, right? I think ultimately the biggest thing we can take away from that is accept that we can't control it, right? First of all, we can't control it, and forgive ourselves for not being the most intelligent person in a scenario like that, right? Because we can talk about theories till we die, right? Yes, and ultimately, until it happens and you experience it, there's no way for you to be able to say what you would do, right? And I think the biggest thing too is when you leave a situation like that anger that you mentioned, it's only self-destructive if you don't deal with the emotions of forgiving yourself and learning to say like, hey, I didn't know any better. Yeah. Right. And that happened, and it's awful, but it wasn't my fault. Right. So we'll kind of end it with this. After experiencing something like that, what advice would you give to yourself then, if you were able to give yourself any advice now from your perspective?
Pay more attention to my surroundings. Because thinking back, I think something might have happened with my brother. There was something going on, but I remember I was taking that walk for a reason, to clear my mind. It wasn't just me just walking just to walk. So I'm thinking, if I wasn't thinking about that stuff when I was walking, if I was thinking about everything around me, I feel like maybe that might have helped me. But yeah, other than that, just seeing anybody suspicious that you think doesn't sit right with you in your gut when you first see them, keep walking.
Listen to your gut.
Yep. Yeah. Listen to your gut. Yep. That's I'd say that one too is a major, because you just never know.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all this stuff. There's a lot more to talk about. I didn't even hit on all the stuff we were supposed to talk about. We kind of went off topic. I apologize for that. I definitely, sometimes you just don't plan for stuff like that, but there's a lot to deal with that. Right. So I really appreciate you coming on. I hope to see you again. There's a lot more to talk about, and we'll see you then.
Yep. I got about 5 to 6 episodes more worth of stuff. So. I'll be back again.
Hey, we'll be glad to have you. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Josh.
Yep.